Your entire life, you were warned about the dangers of wanting too much money. Almost nobody warned you about the danger of wanting money so badly that it becomes the center of your life. That quiet mistake has stolen more dreams than failure ever could. In this audiobook, you're not going to learn how to chase another paycheck. You're going to discover why wealth always seems to move towards certain people as if pulled by an invisible force, while others spend decades running after it without ever catching up. You will travel through ideas that reshape the way you think about value, opportunity, discipline, relationships, risk, purpose, and the silent habits that attract lasting prosperity. This is education, not financial advice. It is an invitation to see the game differently. Here is a sentence worth carrying with you from this moment until the final word. The person who becomes impossible to ignore never has to beg for opportunity. If you stay with me until the end, you may discover that the life you wanted was never running away from you. You were simply running in the wrong direction. Late one evening, after a day that looked successful to everyone else, a man sat alone in his apartment staring at a bank account that should have made him feel secure. The city outside his window was alive with lights. Cars moved like rivers beneath him. Restaurants were full. Music drifted upward from somewhere across the street. Yet inside that quiet room, there was a feeling he could not explain. He had money. He did not have peace. He had income. He did not have freedom. Every month began with excitement and ended with anxiety. Every promotion brought relief that lasted only a few weeks before a new standard of living quietly replaced the old one. He was climbing, yet somehow the horizon kept moving farther away. One day, he asked himself a question that changed everything. What if I am excellent at earning money, but terrible at creating wealth? Those two ideas sound almost identical until you experience the difference. Money arrives. Wealth remains. Money solves today's problems. Wealth changes tomorrow's possibilities. Money can disappear because of one decision. Wealth is built so deeply into the way you think, create, and serve that even if everything vanished, you could build it again. That realization became the beginning of an entirely different life. Perhaps you know someone who always seems calm whenever the economy changes. They do not panic every time headlines become frightening. They do not boast when markets rise. They do not collapse when conditions become difficult. They carry themselves differently because they understand something invisible. They know that real wealth does not begin in a wallet. It begins in identity. A person who believes they must constantly chase money will eventually accept work they dislike, relationships that drain them, habits that exhaust them, and decisions driven entirely by fear. A person who decides to become someone wealth naturally seeks begins asking different questions. How can I become more valuable? How can I solve bigger problems? How can I think more clearly? How can I become trusted? How can I build something that continues creating value even while I sleep? Notice how none of those questions begin with money, yet every one of them eventually leads toward it. There is a quiet irony hidden inside modern life. Technology has made earning easier than ever before. A teenager with a laptop can reach millions of people. A small business can sell across continents. Artificial intelligence can multiply creativity and productivity in ways that previous generations could barely imagine. Yet despite unprecedented opportunity, millions feel financially trapped. Why? Because tools cannot replace thinking. A faster vehicle does not help someone driving in the wrong direction. Many people spend years learning how to perform tasks. Far fewer spend time becoming the kind of person whose judgment creates extraordinary results. Think about the people whose work continues creating value years after they first completed it. An author writes one remarkable book that inspires readers for decades. An engineer designs a product that improves millions of lives. A teacher changes the confidence of a student who later transforms an entire company. A founder solves one painful problem so effectively that customers willingly recommend the solution to everyone they know. In every case, wealth followed value. Not instantly, not magically, but inevitably. This is where many people become impatient. They plant a seed on Monday and expect shade by Friday. Nature has never worked that way. Neither does prosperity. The tallest oak in a forest once looked insignificant. The strongest river began as scattered drops of rain. Everything meaningful compounds quietly before it becomes obvious. When people admire remarkable success, they usually notice the visible harvest. They rarely see the invisible seasons that came before it. The mornings filled with uncertainty. The evenings spent studying instead of entertaining distractions. The conversations that sharpened perspective. The failures that quietly removed arrogance. The discipline practiced when applause was completely absent. That invisible season is where wealth is born. One of the greatest misunderstandings about financial success is the belief that confidence appears after results. Life repeatedly demonstrates the opposite. Healthy confidence grows through keeping promises to yourself before anyone else notices. Each promise honored becomes another brick. Wake up when you said you would. Finish the difficult project. Read when entertainment seems easier. Save when spending feels exciting. Learn when complaining feels justified. Every small act tells your own mind a simple truth. I can trust myself. And self-trust changes everything. People often ask why certain individuals seem fortunate. Luck certainly exists. Timing matters. Circumstances matter. But preparation has a fascinating habit of making luck stay longer. Imagine two people standing beneath the same unexpected opportunity. One has spent years developing useful skills. The other spent years consuming endless distractions. From the outside, it appears that one person became lucky. From the inside, years of preparation finally met a single moment. Opportunity rarely announces itself with fireworks. It usually arrives disguised as responsibility. It asks more from you before it gives more to you. That is why so many walk past it without recognizing its face. Another quiet truth deserves your attention. Scarcity speaks loudly. Abundance whispers. Scarcity says there is never enough. Abundance asks how more can be created. Scarcity compares constantly. Abundance collaborates. Scarcity fears another person's success. Abundance becomes curious about it. Scarcity protects old habits. Abundance invests in new abilities. The voice you strengthen each day eventually becomes your reality. If you spend years feeding fear, fear becomes familiar. If you spend years feeding wisdom, wisdom becomes natural. This is not positive thinking detached from reality. It is practical psychology. Your attention becomes your direction. Your direction becomes your habits. Your habits become your identity. Your identity shapes every financial decision you make. A single decision repeated for 10 years becomes a destiny that feels almost inevitable. Look around carefully. The world rewards reliability more consistently than brilliance. There are gifted people whose talents remain hidden because they never developed consistency. There are ordinary people producing extraordinary lives because they became dependable. Dependable with their word, dependable with their learning, dependable with their effort, dependable with their character. Trust grows slowly. Wealth often follows trust. When people know that your work consistently improves their lives, they return. Then they bring others. That is how quiet reputations become powerful economies. If these thoughts are already stirring something inside you, remember them. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of the largest transformation. And if someone you care about has been exhausting themselves chasing money without ever finding peace, keep them in your thoughts as we continue, because what comes next may become the conversation that changes both of your futures. There is another lesson waiting just beyond this realization, and it begins with a mistake so common that almost everyone believes it is normal. Few people notice it until years have already passed, and by then they have spent far too much of their lives trying to outrun a shadow that was never meant to be caught. The shadow has a name. It is called proving yourself. Many people spend years trying to prove that they deserve success. They work longer than necessary. They buy things they cannot afford. They accept invitations they do not enjoy. They say yes when every instinct tells them to say no. Slowly, without realizing it, they build a life around the opinions of strangers instead of the values that actually create freedom. That is one of the most expensive trades a person can ever make. When your choices are driven by the need to impress, your money becomes a costume instead of a tool. Look carefully at the rhythm of modern life. A new phone is released. People line up before sunrise. A luxury car appears on social media. Thousands suddenly feel dissatisfied with the perfectly reliable car they drove happily only a week before. Someone announces a promotion. Instead of celebrating them, another person quietly begins questioning their own worth. Comparison has become one of the largest invisible industries in the world. It does not manufacture products. It manufactures dissatisfaction. And dissatisfaction is profitable. The less content you feel with your own path, the easier it becomes for someone else to sell you another shortcut, another status symbol, another promise that happiness is one purchase away. But wealth grows in exactly the opposite environment. It grows where clarity replaces comparison. Imagine walking through a forest. Every tree grows at a different pace. The oak never apologizes for not growing like the pine. The pine never envies the maple. Each becomes powerful by becoming completely itself. Only human beings waste precious years trying to bloom according to another person's season. Your financial life works the same way. Someone builds a technology company before turning 30. Someone else discovers their greatest opportunity after 50. One person creates wealth through investing. Another creates it through craftsmanship. Another through education. Another through solving problems no one else wanted to solve. The path changes. The principle never does. Become increasingly valuable. When you stop measuring your progress against someone else's timeline, an unexpected peace enters your decisions. You become patient enough to master difficult skills. You become wise enough to reject opportunities that look exciting but do not fit your purpose. You become disciplined enough to invest in tomorrow instead of constantly rewarding today. That patience is misunderstood because it is quiet. People notice dramatic success stories. Few notice the years that prepared them. Think about a master carpenter. The first chair they build is awkward. The 10th is better. The 100th feels natural. By the 1000th, every movement carries decades of invisible experience. Customers are not paying only for wood. They are paying for judgment. The same is true for almost every profession. Experience becomes compressed wisdom. Wisdom becomes value. Value becomes opportunity. Opportunity becomes wealth. Notice how money appears only at the end of that chain. Too many people reverse the order. They ask how to make more money before asking how to become more useful. That is like asking for fruit before planting roots. Roots are invisible. Fruit is visible. Yet fruit depends entirely upon what no one can see. There is another misunderstanding that quietly steals years from capable people. They confuse being busy with being effective. A calendar full of activity creates the comforting illusion of progress. Meetings, emails, notifications, phone calls, small emergencies. At the end of the day, exhaustion feels like evidence that something meaningful happened. Sometimes it did. Often it did not. Imagine two builders. One spends 12 hours carrying bricks from one side of a field to another without a plan. The second spends 1 hour studying the blueprint before lifting the first brick. Who builds the stronger house? Thinking is productive. Reflection is productive. Learning is productive. Planning is productive. The world often celebrates visible effort while ignoring invisible preparation. Yet invisible preparation multiplies visible results. Many years ago, an old craftsman was asked why his work looked effortless. He smiled and replied that it only looked effortless because nobody counted the thousands of mistakes hidden inside his hands. That answer contains extraordinary wisdom. People admire smooth performance. They rarely admire patient practice. If you become addicted to applause, you will avoid the very work that earns lasting respect. Real builders fall in love with improvement long before recognition arrives. They understand something important. Identity grows before income. Character grows before capital. Trust grows before transactions. Every lasting structure begins beneath the surface. Have you ever noticed how confidently some people walk into a room? It is tempting to believe confidence came from success. Very often, confidence came from keeping promises that nobody else witnessed. The promise to finish reading one more chapter. The promise to exercise despite fatigue. The promise to save a little every month. The promise to tell the truth even when dishonesty looked easier. Integrity is a private investment with public returns. People sense it before they can explain it. Clients trust it. Partners respect it. Friends remember it. Opportunities quietly move toward it. This is why reputation may be one of the greatest financial assets anyone can own. Money can be borrowed. Buildings can be rebuilt. Markets can recover. A damaged reputation is far more expensive. Protect it carefully. There will always be moments when cutting corners appears profitable. Those moments are tests disguised as opportunities. The short path often becomes the longest regret. The slower path built upon honesty almost always reaches a destination worth arriving at. Another truth becomes clearer with every passing year. The wealthiest people are not always those who earn the most. Often, they are the people who understand the difference between consumption and creation. Consumption feels rewarding immediately. Creation feels rewarding eventually. Consumption asks, what can entertain me today? Creation asks, what can serve others tomorrow? Consumption empties time. Creation multiplies it. Every evening presents the same quiet question. Will this hour disappear forever, or will it become an investment that continues paying me for years? There is no perfect answer every day. Rest matters, joy matters, family matters. But unconscious living slowly becomes expensive. Conscious living quietly becomes powerful. One evening becomes 1 week. 1 week becomes 1 year. 1 year becomes an identity. Eventually, people describe you using words that once sounded impossible: reliable, wise, creative, prosperous. Not because fortune randomly selected you, because your daily decisions patiently shaped you into someone wealth could finally trust. And once that transformation begins, something remarkable happens. You stop asking how to find opportunities. You begin noticing that opportunities have been surrounding you all along, waiting patiently for the version of you that was finally prepared to recognize them. The next realization changes everything, because it reveals why so many intelligent people stay financially exhausted, while people with no greater talent quietly build lives of extraordinary freedom. The difference is rarely intelligence. It is architecture. One person builds a life that requires constant effort just to remain standing. The other builds systems that continue working long after today's effort has ended. Picture two neighbors living on the same street. Every morning, they leave home at the same hour. They return around the same time. They are equally hardworking. They both care about their families. From the outside, their lives appear almost identical. 10 years later, one still feels trapped by every unexpected expense. The other has choices. The question is not who worked harder. The question is what each person was building while they worked. Many people exchange time directly for money every day. There is dignity in honest work, and every meaningful journey begins somewhere. But if every dollar depends entirely on every hour you personally work, your income has quietly become a ceiling. Eventually, time wins every argument. There are only so many hours in a day. There are only so many years in a career. That is why wealth is created by learning how to separate value from the constant presence of its creator. A teacher records lessons that continue helping students around the world. A designer creates templates that solve problems thousands of times. A business owner develops a team capable of serving customers without depending entirely on one person. An investor allows capital to support businesses, creating value across generations. Different paths, the same principle. Create something that continues serving even when you are resting. That idea can feel overwhelming at first. Many people immediately think they need millions of dollars or an extraordinary invention. They do not. Every large system began as a very small habit, repeated with extraordinary consistency. The first customer, the first investment, the first saved dollar, the first useful article, the first skill practiced after work while everyone else relaxed. Growth rarely announces itself dramatically. It whispers, one extra page, one better conversation, one improved decision, one unnecessary expense avoided, one courageous phone call. Most people underestimate what these small moments become after 5 or 10 years because the human mind is attracted to dramatic change. Quiet progress feels almost invisible while it is happening. Then one day, everyone calls it overnight success. The truth smiles quietly because it remembers every ordinary day that came before. There is another lesson hidden inside nature. A river never argues with a mountain. It simply continues flowing, day after day, season after season. Eventually, the mountain changes shape. Persistence accomplishes what force often cannot. Financial freedom follows the same rhythm. People search endlessly for the perfect investment, the perfect career, the perfect business idea, believing certainty must arrive before commitment. Meanwhile, someone else begins with imperfect knowledge, learns continuously, adjusts with humility, and quietly builds momentum. Perfection delays. Progress compounds. There is wisdom in preparing before confidence appears. Think back to the first time you learned something difficult. Perhaps it was riding a bicycle, driving a car, speaking another language, playing an instrument. At first, every movement demanded conscious attention. Eventually, your body remembered what your mind once struggled to understand. Money follows similar patterns. Budgeting feels awkward before it becomes natural. Investing feels confusing before it becomes familiar. Negotiating feels uncomfortable before it becomes calm. Leadership feels intimidating before it becomes part of your identity. Every expert was once uncertain. The difference is that they stayed long enough to become comfortable with temporary incompetence. Many people abandon valuable skills because they mistake beginner discomfort for permanent inability. That misunderstanding quietly costs fortunes. Allow yourself to be inexperienced. Allow yourself to ask questions. Allow yourself to learn slowly. Embarrassment lasts a moment. Ignorance maintained for years becomes expensive. One of the greatest gifts you can develop is the ability to remain teachable after achieving success. Success has a peculiar temptation. It whispers that because one strategy worked yesterday, it must work forever. History repeatedly proves otherwise. Entire industries disappear. New technologies reshape old professions. Consumer habits evolve. Artificial intelligence changes workflows that once seemed permanent. The people who continue creating wealth are rarely the ones who resist change. They become students again and again. Their ego never becomes larger than their curiosity. Curiosity is profitable. It notices patterns before others do. It asks better questions. It discovers opportunities hiding inside problems everyone else complains about. When people say the world is changing too quickly, another person quietly asks how they can help others navigate that change. One sees disruption, the other sees service. Guess which mindset attracts more opportunity? There is something else worth protecting: your attention. Attention has become one of the most valuable currencies on earth. Every notification competes for it. Every advertisement purchases it. Every endless scroll quietly consumes it. The tragedy is not that distractions exist. The tragedy is that many people surrender their greatest creative years without realizing what they traded away. Attention, directed consistently toward meaningful work, becomes expertise. Expertise becomes trust. Trust becomes influence. Influence creates opportunities impossible to predict. Guard your attention as carefully as previous generations guarded gold. Because where your attention goes, your future quietly follows. If you spend every day reacting to other people's priorities, you eventually forget your own. A simple habit can change everything. Before asking what the world wants from you today, ask what the future version of yourself would thank you for doing. Sometimes the answer is studying. Sometimes it is resting. Sometimes it is making the difficult phone call you have postponed for months. Sometimes it is apologizing. Sometimes it is beginning. The important part is choosing intentionally, not accidentally. A meaningful life is rarely built by accident. Neither is lasting wealth. There may be moments when progress feels painfully slow. You save faithfully while others appear to become rich overnight. You study while someone else goes viral. You improve quietly while louder voices capture attention. Do not mistake visibility for value. The tallest fireworks disappear within seconds. The stars remain through the entire night. Build the kind of life that still shines after excitement fades. If these words have given you even one new way to see your future, hold on to that feeling. Quiet transformations often begin with a single decision repeated long enough to become character. And if you know someone who measures their worth only by the size of a paycheck, remember them, because the next lesson reveals why the richest asset you will ever own cannot be deposited into a bank. Yet every fortune is built upon it. It begins with something no market can price and no recession can take away. The greatest asset you will ever own cannot be held in your hands. It cannot be stolen by a thief. It cannot disappear because of inflation. It cannot be destroyed by a market crash, and yet every fortune that lasts is built upon it. Your ability to think. Not simply to think often, to think independently. There is a quiet habit that separates builders from followers. Builders pause before reacting. Followers react before thinking. Every day the world invites you to borrow someone else's opinions. Headlines tell you what to fear. Social media tells you what to admire. Advertisements tell you what to desire. Before long, a person can spend years pursuing goals they never consciously chose. Then one day, they wake up successful by someone else's definition and strangely empty by their own. That emptiness has very little to do with money. It has everything to do with direction. Imagine boarding a train without reading the destination. The seats are comfortable, the journey is smooth, the scenery is beautiful. Hours later, you realize you are traveling confidently toward a place you never intended to visit. Life works the same way. Movement is not the same as progress. Speed is not the same as purpose. A calendar filled with activity can still lead nowhere worth arriving. That is why quiet reflection is one of the highest forms of productivity. Not because reflection replaces action, because it makes action meaningful. Many people are afraid of silence. The moment the room becomes quiet, they reach for a screen. Music, messages, videos, anything to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. Yet the most important conversations of your life happen where no one else can hear them. Who am I becoming? What do I actually value? If no one applauded me for the next 5 years, would I still choose this path? Those questions are uncomfortable. They are also liberating, because every honest answer removes another layer of borrowed ambition. There is remarkable freedom in wanting enough instead of wanting everything. Enough does not mean giving up. It means defining success before the world defines it for you. For one person, enough means building a business that allows afternoons with family. For another, it means creating medical breakthroughs. For another, it means traveling freely while working from anywhere. For another, it means mentoring young entrepreneurs in their community. Wealth without definition becomes an endless race. You reach one milestone only to invent another. The finish line moves faster than your feet. Eventually, exhaustion disguises itself as ambition. The people who remain peaceful while becoming prosperous usually know something simple. They decided what enough looks like. Everything beyond that becomes generosity. rather than desperation. There is another invisible habit that changes financial lives. Learning to delay applause. Children naturally want immediate rewards. Adults who create extraordinary lives often become comfortable postponing them. They understand that today's sacrifice becomes tomorrow's freedom. This principle appears everywhere. The athlete trains long before standing on the podium. The musician practices scales nobody will ever hear. The scientist performs countless failed experiments before one breakthrough changes everything. The entrepreneur spends evenings refining an idea that may not produce income for years. Delayed gratification is not punishment. It is the ability to negotiate wisely with your future. You quietly tell tomorrow, "I believe in you enough to invest in you today." That sentence alone can reshape a lifetime. Every unnecessary purchase asks a hidden question. Would you rather impress someone for a moment or strengthen your future for years? Neither answer is always wrong. Joy matters. Celebration matters. Experiences matter. But unconscious spending slowly teaches the mind that every emotion deserves an immediate transaction. Stress, buy something. Boredom, buy something. Loneliness, buy something. Soon money becomes emotional medicine instead of purposeful energy. Healing that pattern begins by asking a gentler question. What am I truly looking for right now? Perhaps it is not another purchase. Perhaps it is rest, connection, meaningful conversation, movement, fresh air, creative work. The strongest financial decisions are often emotional decisions made wisely. There is another misconception that deserves to disappear. Many people believe wealthy individuals simply think about money more often. The opposite is frequently true. They think more often about problems, needs, systems, people, innovation, improvement. Money becomes the natural consequence of solving meaningful problems consistently. Consider the small cafe that everyone recommends. Customers return because someone cared about details. Warm greetings, fresh ingredients, clean tables, reliable quality. The owner is not merely selling coffee. They are creating an experience people gladly return to. That principle scales far beyond restaurants. The lawyer who explains difficult ideas with clarity. The software developer who removes frustration instead of adding complexity. The nurse whose compassion eases fear. The electrician whose honesty creates lifelong trust. Every profession offers opportunities to become unforgettable. The marketplace rewards those who reduce pain, increase possibility, or create beauty. Ask yourself every morning, whose day will become easier because I exist? That question quietly transforms careers, because people remember how you made their lives better long after they forget your resume. Another surprising truth appears when observing genuinely prosperous people. Many are remarkably generous, not because generosity made them poor, because generosity reminded them that wealth is a tool, not an identity. Money amplifies character. If someone is fearful, more money often magnifies fear. If someone is grateful, more money often magnifies gratitude. If someone constantly seeks significance through possessions, additional possessions rarely satisfy them. The deepest hunger was never material. It was emotional. Do not wait until you have abundance before practicing generosity. Generosity begins with attention, with encouragement, with knowledge, with time, with introducing two people who should know each other, with sharing wisdom that saves someone years of unnecessary struggle, when generosity becomes part of your identity before prosperity arrives. Prosperity often has somewhere meaningful to go. One evening, an elderly investor was asked the greatest financial lesson he had learned after decades of success. People expected him to mention markets, taxes, businesses. Instead, he smiled and answered quietly, "Protect your ability to sleep peacefully." The room became silent. He explained that every dishonest decision, every unnecessary risk driven by ego, every promise broken for profit eventually demanded payment from his peace of mind. He had seen people become richer while becoming smaller. He had also seen people build moderate fortunes while becoming deeply respected, deeply trusted, and deeply fulfilled. Only one of those paths interested him. Never exchange inner peace for outward appearance. It is one of the worst financial trades imaginable. As years pass, you begin to notice something beautiful. The people who seem truly wealthy carry themselves lightly. They are curious, present, patient. They listen more than they speak. They ask thoughtful questions. They make decisions without theatrical urgency because they no longer believe every opportunity must be chased. They have become the kind of people opportunities naturally seek. And perhaps that is the greatest shift of all. Stop asking how to catch wealth. Start asking how to become someone worthy of keeping it. Because attracting opportunity is only the beginning. Keeping it requires wisdom. Growing it requires discipline. Sharing it requires character. And all three are cultivated long before anyone notices the results. There is one final illusion that quietly controls millions of lives without their awareness. It disguises itself as security, yet it often prevents extraordinary growth. The moment you recognize it, you will never look at risk, comfort, or your own potential in quite the same way. Comfort has a remarkable talent. It rarely announces itself as danger. It arrives wearing the clothes of reason. Stay where you are. Wait until conditions improve. Learn a little more before you begin. Save that idea for another year. Someone else is already doing it better. Those sentences sound responsible. Repeated for long enough, they become invisible chains. There is an important difference between caution and comfort. Caution protects wisdom. Comfort often protects fear. The challenge is that both speak with calm voices. Only one leads toward growth. Think about the first time you stood at the edge of deep water. Your body hesitated. Your imagination exaggerated every possible danger. Then someone encouraged you to take one careful step. The water was colder than expected. The fear was louder than reality. A few minutes later, you were swimming. Life repeats this lesson in countless forms. The first investment, the first public presentation, the first difficult negotiation, the first employee you trust, the first business you begin, the first honest conversation you have been avoiding. Growth almost always lives just beyond familiar ground. This does not mean reckless decisions. Recklessness mistakes excitement for courage. Real courage studies carefully, prepares thoroughly, then acts despite uncertainty. Waiting for absolute certainty is another way of choosing stillness. The future has never offered guarantees. It has only offered possibilities. Those who build meaningful lives learn to work with probabilities instead of promises. There is another illusion that quietly influences financial decisions. The illusion that security comes from dependence. Many people believe security means finding one dependable source of income and protecting it forever. True resilience is different. It comes from becoming adaptable. Imagine two trees standing before a storm. One is rigid, the other bends with the wind. The rigid tree appears stronger until pressure arrives. Then its greatest strength becomes its weakness. Adaptability keeps the second tree alive. Your career works the same way. Industries evolve. Technology transforms familiar work. Consumer behavior shifts. The people who continue flourishing are not necessarily the strongest. They are the most adaptable. They keep learning. They remain curious. They refuse to let yesterday's achievements become tomorrow's limitations. Adaptability is a financial asset. So is humility. Humility allows you to admit when something no longer works. Humility invites better questions. Humility keeps your mind open after success arrives. There is enormous freedom in saying three simple words. I was wrong. Those words have rescued businesses, saved marriages, protected investments, strengthened friendships. Yet pride often convinces people to defend mistakes long after wisdom invites them to change direction. The market does not reward pride. Reality does not negotiate with ego. Learning does. One habit worth developing is conducting quiet reviews of your own life. Every few months, pause long enough to ask yourself a handful of honest questions. What created the most value during this season? What wasted the most energy? Which habits strengthened my future? Which habits quietly weakened it? Who brought wisdom into my life? Who constantly pulled me away from becoming who I want to become? These questions are more valuable than many people realize. Without reflection, repetition becomes automatic. With reflection, experience becomes wisdom. There is another shift that often surprises people. As wealth grows, simplicity becomes increasingly attractive. At first, success often looks like adding more possessions, more commitments, more responsibilities, more complexity. Eventually, many discover that freedom comes from subtraction. Fewer unnecessary expenses, fewer meaningless obligations, fewer distractions, fewer attempts to impress people who were never paying close attention in the first place. Simplicity creates space. Space allows thought. Thought creates better decisions. Better decisions quietly create better lives. A cluttered schedule can become just as expensive as a cluttered home. Every unnecessary commitment silently steals attention from something that matters more. The wealthiest resource you possess is not your money. It is your ability to direct your energy toward what truly deserves it. Protect that ability. Another lesson appears in every meaningful relationship. No one creates lasting prosperity entirely alone. Every significant achievement contains invisible partnerships. Teachers who believed in someone before they believed in themselves. Friends who spoke truth instead of flattery. Colleagues who challenged weak ideas. Family members who offered encouragement during uncertain seasons. Success stories often sound individual. They are almost always collective. Learn to recognize people who multiply your thinking instead of merely consuming your time. Seek conversations that leave you wiser than when they began. Become that kind of person for others. Networks are not built through collecting business cards. They are built through consistent contribution. People remember generosity that expects nothing in return. Trust accumulates quietly. One introduction, one promise kept, one thoughtful conversation, one problem solved. Years later, those moments connect in ways nobody could have predicted. Life has a fascinating habit of rewarding those who help others move forward. Not always immediately, not always obviously, but consistently. There is a phrase that deserves to become part of your daily thinking. Leave every person better than you found them. Perhaps they leave smiling. Perhaps they leave with greater clarity. Perhaps they leave encouraged enough to continue after nearly giving up. Value does not always arrive wrapped in invoices. Sometimes it arrives through character, and character has extraordinary compound interest. Imagine reaching the final years of your life. Your investments performed well. Your career exceeded expectations. Your home is comfortable. Then someone asks a different question. Who became stronger because they knew you? Suddenly, another definition of wealth appears. Not only what you accumulated, what you cultivated, not only what you owned, what you inspired, not only what you earned, what you enabled. That perspective changes everything. Money becomes a servant instead of a master. Ambition becomes meaningful instead of desperate. Work becomes contribution instead of survival. Perhaps this is why the calmest, prosperous people seem impossible to intimidate. They know who they are without their possessions. If circumstances change tomorrow, they still possess judgment, discipline, integrity, creativity, relationships. Those are forms of capital no economy can erase. And because they understand that truth, they no longer wake each morning chasing wealth. They wake each morning becoming more valuable. Ironically, that is precisely why wealth continues moving toward them. Take a slow breath and let this idea settle. You do not build an extraordinary financial life by obsessing over money every hour of every day. You build it by becoming someone whose presence consistently creates more value than they consume. Someone who solves, builds, learns, listens, improves, keeps promises, acts with patience when others panic, acts with courage when others hesitate, acts with generosity when others cling to scarcity. Eventually, the world notices, not because you demanded attention, because your work became impossible to ignore. And once that happens, the question is no longer whether opportunities exist. The question becomes whether you have the wisdom to choose the right ones, because the next stage of this journey is not about attracting more possibilities. It is about learning the quiet discipline of saying no to almost everything, so you can say a wholehearted yes to the few things capable of transforming your entire life. The ability to say no may be one of the least celebrated forms of wealth, yet it quietly shapes every extraordinary life. When people first begin making progress, they imagine success will solve their problems. Instead, it often replaces old problems with new ones. More invitations, more opportunities, more requests, more distractions disguised as possibilities. The person who once wondered why nobody noticed them suddenly discovers that everyone wants a piece of their attention. That is the moment character is tested again, not because saying yes is difficult, because saying no feels uncomfortable. Many people spend years learning how to create opportunity. Far fewer learn how to protect it. Imagine a gardener planting hundreds of seeds across every empty patch of land. At first, it feels productive. Weeks later, every plant is competing for sunlight. None become as strong as they could have been. Now, imagine another gardener. They choose carefully. They prepare the soil. They water consistently. They remove weeds without hesitation. Months later, their harvest looks effortless. Focus creates abundance. Scattered attention creates exhaustion. Your life works the same way. Every commitment carries a hidden price. Not only the hours you spend doing it, the opportunities you silently decline because your time has already been promised elsewhere. Every yes contains an invisible no. Every no protects an invisible yes. This realization changes how you view your calendar. Instead of asking whether something sounds exciting, you begin asking whether it belongs in the future you are intentionally building. If the answer is unclear, patience is usually wiser than urgency. There is enormous strength in leaving space. Space allows unexpected opportunities to arrive. Space allows creativity to breathe. Space allows your mind to connect ideas that constant busyness would have buried. Many breakthroughs do not appear while rushing. They appear while walking, reading quietly, watching the sunrise, sitting beside a notebook with no notifications demanding your attention. Stillness is not laziness. Stillness is often where wisdom catches up with experience. Think about the greatest decisions of your life. Perhaps accepting a job, choosing a partner, moving to a different city, beginning a business. Very few of those decisions benefited from panic. The clearest choices usually emerged after enough silence allowed emotion to settle. Financial decisions deserve the same respect. Excitement is not evidence. Fear is not evidence. Facts matter. Judgment matters. Time matters. When you stop reacting to every headline, every rumor, every prediction, you reclaim one of the rarest advantages in modern life: a calm mind. Calm does not mean passive. Calm means deliberate. A deliberate person notices details others overlook. They ask questions before making assumptions. They understand that temporary emotions often produce permanent consequences. That understanding alone has saved countless people from expensive mistakes. Another principle deserves a permanent place in your thinking. Protect your reputation more fiercely than your possessions. Possessions can be replaced. Trust cannot. One careless promise, one dishonest shortcut, one decision driven entirely by greed. Years of credibility can disappear in moments. Meanwhile, every promise honored becomes another quiet investment. People begin introducing you to opportunities because your name itself communicates reliability. That is a remarkable form of wealth. It cannot be purchased. It must be earned day after day, decision after decision, conversation after conversation. There is also something deeply liberating about becoming comfortable with enough. The world constantly whispers that more is always better. A larger house, a faster car, another promotion, another achievement. Ambition has its place. Growth is beautiful. But endless accumulation without purpose quietly becomes another prison. Ask yourself a different question. What kind of life am I actually trying to build? Not what kind of life impresses strangers. Not what social media rewards. Not what someone else expects. What life allows you to become fully alive? Perhaps your answer includes meaningful work, evenings with family, health, deep friendships, creative freedom, and financial peace. Notice that money supports each of those things. It is not the destination. It is the bridge. Bridges are valuable because they help people reach somewhere worth going. No one builds a life simply to stand forever on the bridge. This is why wealth should always remain a magnificent servant and a terrible master. The moment money becomes your identity, every market movement begins controlling your emotions. The moment money becomes your tool, it quietly returns to its proper place. You become difficult to manipulate. You stop making purchases to silence insecurity. You stop accepting work that violates your principles simply because it pays slightly more. You begin recognizing that every dollar carries a vote for the kind of future you wish to create. Spend accordingly. Invest accordingly. Live accordingly. There is another truth hidden in plain sight. People who create lasting prosperity rarely obsess over appearing successful. They become absorbed in becoming useful. Usefulness is magnetic. A doctor who genuinely listens. A mechanic whose honesty removes anxiety. A writer whose words give someone courage. A programmer whose software saves thousands of hours. A parent whose wisdom shapes future generations. Usefulness echoes far beyond transactions. Every meaningful contribution leaves traces in lives you may never fully see. That realization transforms ordinary work into extraordinary purpose. Suddenly, every interaction matters. Every customer matters. Every student matters. Every client matters. Every conversation becomes another opportunity to leave the world slightly better than you found it. This is where wealth quietly changes character. Instead of asking, "How much can I take?" you begin asking, "How much value can I create?" One question shrinks the spirit, the other expands it. Years pass. The difference becomes impossible to ignore. One person spends life chasing money. The other spends life becoming someone whose judgment, integrity, creativity, and generosity continuously create value. One grows tired. The other grows stronger. One constantly fears losing everything. The other knows that even if circumstances change tomorrow, they could build again, because the greatest investment was never outside themselves. It was always within. That is the quiet secret hidden beneath every lasting fortune. Money follows value. Value follows character. Character follows daily choices, and daily choices belong to you. Every morning, every conversation, every promise, every hour. You never truly control the economy. You never control markets. You never control luck. But you always influence the person making the next decision. That person is your greatest investment. Treat them accordingly. Teach them patiently. Challenge them honestly. Forgive their mistakes. Expect their growth. Because one day you will look back and realize that wealth did not suddenly arrive. It noticed who you were becoming. Then, little by little, it decided to stay. There is a story told in different forms across many cultures. A traveler spends years searching for treasure. He crosses mountains. He sails oceans. He endures storms. He follows maps left by people who never reached the destination themselves. After decades of searching, tired and disappointed, he returns home with little more than experience. While repairing the old house he once hurried to leave, he discovers a hidden room beneath the floor. Inside is the treasure he spent his entire life chasing. The story is not really about gold. It is about perspective. Many people spend years searching outside themselves for the very qualities that attract wealth from the inside out. Confidence, discipline, integrity, patience, curiosity, generosity. The world often rewards those qualities with opportunities that appear to be luck. They are rarely luck. They are recognizable patterns. Consider two people who receive the exact same opportunity. One sees possibility, the other sees risk. One prepares, the other postpones. One learns quickly after making mistakes. The other becomes embarrassed and quits. Years later, people say the first person was fortunate. Fortune was only part of the story. The larger part was hidden inside thousands of invisible decisions. That is why you should never envy another person's harvest until you understand their seasons. You have no idea how many lonely mornings they experienced, how many evenings they chose learning over entertainment, how many uncomfortable conversations they refused to avoid, how many temporary pleasures they willingly sacrificed for permanent freedom. Harvests are public, seasons are private. The danger of comparison is that you compare your private struggles with someone else's public victories. No comparison can ever be fair under those conditions. Instead, compare yourself with the person you were 1 year ago. Are your decisions wiser? Is your attention stronger? Have your habits become more intentional? Do you respond with greater calm during uncertainty? Can you solve larger problems than you once could? If the answer is yes, then wealth is already moving toward you, even if the evidence has not fully appeared in your bank account yet. Because your internal economy is becoming stronger, and every external economy eventually reflects the internal one. There is another truth worth remembering. The people who constantly complain about circumstances often surrender the only power they actually possess: responsibility. Responsibility has received an unfair reputation. Some people hear the word and immediately think of blame. It is not blame. It is ownership. Ownership says, this situation may not be entirely my fault, but my response belongs to me. That sentence restores freedom. If your response belongs to you, then your future is still being written. Ownership changes the questions you ask. Instead of asking why this happened to me, you begin asking what this experience can teach me. Instead of asking why someone else succeeded, you ask what habits allowed them to create those results. Instead of waiting for motivation, you create structure. Instead of wishing for confidence, you build evidence. Every promise you keep to yourself becomes another piece of evidence that you can trust your own character. Trusting yourself changes your relationship with opportunity. You stop hesitating quite so much. You stop needing endless reassurance. You stop collecting advice from people who have never built the life you hope to create. Advice matters, but discernment matters more. Not every confident voice carries wisdom. Some speak loudly because certainty attracts attention. The wisest people often speak more quietly. They ask questions. They listen carefully. They admit what they do not know. That humility creates continuous growth. A closed mind eventually reaches a ceiling. An open mind rarely does. If you want wealth to chase you, become endlessly fascinated with learning. Read beyond your profession. Study psychology, history, communication, technology, economics, leadership, art. Human beings rarely solve their greatest problems by thinking only within one category. Innovation often appears when two unrelated ideas meet for the first time. A designer studies nature. An engineer studies music. A doctor studies philosophy. A teacher studies entrepreneurship. Suddenly, fresh solutions appear where everyone else saw limitations. Creative thinking multiplies value. Value multiplies opportunity. Opportunity multiplies wealth. The chain remains the same. Never become so focused on earning that you stop becoming. Becoming is the deeper work. Earning is often its consequence. Another beautiful habit deserves your attention. Celebrate quietly. When progress arrives, enjoy it. Be grateful for it. Share it with those you love, but never let success convince you that growth has ended. Every summit reveals another horizon, not because life is trying to exhaust you, because human potential is remarkably expansive. The goal is not endless striving. The goal is endless becoming. A kinder version of yourself, a wiser version, a calmer version, a more generous version, a more disciplined version. As those qualities deepen, your relationship with money changes naturally. You no longer panic during temporary setbacks. You no longer chase every shiny opportunity. You no longer believe your worth rises and falls with your income. You understand something permanent. Money is what you have. Character is who you are. Income can fluctuate. Identity compounds. One can disappear overnight. The other accompanies you everywhere. Perhaps this is why some people rebuild after losing everything. Observers call them resilient. What they are really witnessing is internal wealth. External wealth simply follows it again. If your business disappeared tomorrow, what would remain? Your knowledge, your relationships, your reputation, your creativity, your discipline, your courage. Those assets often matter far more than the balance printed on any statement. Invest in them relentlessly. No recession can erase wisdom. No inflation reduces integrity. No market correction decreases kindness. No competitor can duplicate your unique combination of experience, values, perspective, and character. That combination is your unfair advantage. Develop it carefully. Protect it fiercely. Use it generously. Because in the end, the marketplace rewards authenticity more consistently than imitation. People can sense the difference. They know when someone genuinely wants to serve. They know when someone merely wants to sell. One creates transactions. The other creates trust. Trust outlives transactions. As this journey continues, remember the sentence that opened our time together. Hard work alone can keep a person poor if it is disconnected from value, vision, and intentional growth. But when disciplined effort is guided by wisdom, multiplied through service, strengthened by character, and sustained by patience, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop chasing money. Money begins chasing the person you have become. And that transformation does not begin tomorrow. It begins the next time you choose learning over comfort, the next time you choose integrity over convenience, the next time you choose creation over consumption, the next time you decide that your greatest investment is not a stock, a property, or a business. It is the person staring back at you every morning. Because the world can only reward the value you are willing to become. And once you understand that truth, wealth is no longer a destination waiting somewhere in the distance. It becomes the quiet companion that naturally walks beside a life built with purpose, patience, courage, and unwavering character. There comes a moment in every meaningful journey when success stops looking exciting and starts looking ordinary. Not because it has lost its value, because the habits that once felt extraordinary have become part of who you are. You no longer force yourself to read. Learning has become as natural as breathing. You no longer force yourself to save. You instinctively think about tomorrow before spending today. You no longer force yourself to keep your word. Integrity has become your default language. This is one of the quiet miracles of character. Repeated actions slowly disappear into identity. At first, discipline feels heavy. Then it feels familiar. Eventually, it feels strange to live without it. Think about the first time you tried to wake up earlier than usual. The alarm sounded almost offensive. Your mind produced endless arguments. 5 more minutes. Tomorrow will be better. You worked hard yesterday. Every excuse sounded reasonable. Yet each morning you stood up anyway. You taught your mind a lesson far greater than waking early. You taught it that your decisions matter more than your moods. That lesson reaches far beyond mornings. It follows you into meetings, into investments, into conversations, into moments where fear whispers that comfort would be easier. A disciplined mind does not become fearless. It simply becomes familiar with acting despite fear. That distinction changes everything. Many people believe courage means feeling no uncertainty. Real courage often feels uncertain. It simply refuses to let uncertainty become authority. Imagine a sailor crossing an ocean. The wind changes constantly. Storms appear without permission. The waves never ask whether today is convenient. The sailor cannot control the sea, but they can adjust the sails. Life asks exactly the same of you. You cannot control interest rates. You cannot control political decisions. You cannot control technological disruption. You cannot control whether another company enters your industry tomorrow. But you can continue learning. You can improve your judgment. You can strengthen relationships. You can protect your integrity. You can remain adaptable. Those are your sails. The people who appear calm during uncertainty usually understand this principle deeply. They do not waste energy demanding control over the uncontrollable. They invest that energy where it can actually create results. There is remarkable peace in accepting reality instead of arguing with it. Reality always wins. The sooner you cooperate with it, the sooner it begins working with you instead of against you. One of the greatest realities of wealth is that money follows trust far more often than cleverness. Think about the people you repeatedly choose to work with. Why do you return? Not because they are perfect, because they are dependable. You know what to expect. You know they will answer honestly. You know they will correct mistakes instead of hiding them. Consistency creates confidence. Confidence creates loyalty. Loyalty creates opportunity. That chain has built countless businesses, and it begins with something that costs nothing. Keeping your word. If you tell someone you will call, call. If you promise to deliver by Friday, deliver by Friday. If circumstances change, communicate before disappointment arrives. Simple actions, extraordinary consequences. The marketplace quietly rewards reliability because reliability removes uncertainty. People are willing to invest where they feel safe. Become someone whose presence reduces anxiety rather than increasing it. There is another principle that becomes increasingly valuable as your life expands. Protect your energy from unnecessary negativity. This does not mean pretending every day is perfect. Life is wonderfully imperfect. Businesses struggle. Plans fail. People disappoint us. Dreams sometimes take far longer than expected. Acknowledging reality is wisdom. Living permanently inside bitterness is surrender. Some people rehearse their disappointment so often that they begin introducing themselves through old wounds. Every conversation returns to what went wrong. Every opportunity is filtered through yesterday's pain. Eventually, they stop seeing possibilities because they have trained themselves to search only for evidence that confirms their disappointment. Do not allow temporary setbacks to become permanent identities. You experienced failure. You are not failure. You experienced loss. You are not loss. You experienced rejection. You are not rejection. Those distinctions matter because identity influences action. Action influences results. Results reinforce identity. Break the cycle where it serves you poorly. Strengthen it where it serves you well. There is immense power in asking yourself one question at the end of every day. What did today teach me? Some days teach patience, some teach humility, some teach better planning, some teach gratitude, some teach that you are stronger than you imagined. Every day contains tuition. Wise people refuse to waste the lesson after paying the price. Eventually, those lessons become intuition. You begin sensing poor decisions before making them. You recognize unhealthy partnerships earlier. You identify meaningful opportunities faster, not because you possess supernatural insight, because experience has quietly sharpened perception. That is another form of wealth, perhaps the most beautiful, the ability to see clearly. The world constantly offers shortcuts. Get rich quickly. Become successful overnight. Master everything instantly. Yet nature continues teaching the opposite lesson. The strongest roots grow patiently. The deepest rivers carve stone through persistence. The brightest stars burn for millions of years. Lasting things rarely hurry. They simply refuse to stop. Allow your own progress to follow that rhythm. Steady, intentional, faithful. There will be seasons when nobody notices your effort. Continue anyway. There will be moments when results seem delayed. Continue anyway. There will be people who misunderstand your priorities. Continue anyway. Not because stubbornness is always wise, because purpose deserves endurance. One day someone will ask how your life changed. They will expect one dramatic answer, one lucky break, one perfect investment, one miraculous opportunity. You may smile because you know the truth. Your life changed through hundreds of ordinary decisions that nobody applauded at the time. You kept reading, you kept learning, you kept saving, you kept serving, you kept improving, you kept your promises. You stayed curious after others became comfortable. You remained grateful after others became entitled. You became more interested in creating value than collecting attention. And almost without noticing, your relationship with money transformed. It stopped feeling like something running away from you. It became something naturally drawn toward the value you consistently created. That is the quiet secret hidden beneath every enduring fortune. Not chasing, not desperation, not comparison, contribution, character, consistency. When those qualities become the foundation of your life, wealth is no longer something you hunt. It becomes something you are prepared to receive, prepared to grow, and prepared to use wisely. Because in the end, the richest people are not simply those who possess the most. They are the ones whose presence leaves every room, every conversation, every business, every friendship, and every generation more valuable than it was before they arrived. Become that person, and you will never need to spend your life chasing wealth again. Instead, wealth will recognize your value, walk beside your purpose, and remain because it has finally found someone who understands exactly what it was meant to do. There is one final perspective that quietly changes the meaning of everything we have explored together. Many people ask the wrong question for most of their lives. They ask, how can I make more money? It sounds reasonable. It is not the most powerful question. A better question is, who must I become so that creating value becomes natural? The difference between those two questions is the difference between hunting and cultivating. A hunter depends on finding the next opportunity. A gardener depends on nurturing what continually produces opportunity. Neither approach is wrong, but only one creates abundance that continues long after today's effort has ended. Picture a craftsman walking into the same workshop every morning for 40 years. The tools become worn. The wood changes. The world outside transforms. Technology advances. Customers evolve. Yet one thing remains constant. Each day the craftsman asks a simple question. How can I leave this piece better than I found it? Eventually, that question extends beyond furniture. It shapes conversations. It shapes relationships. It shapes leadership. It shapes life itself. That is how excellence is formed, not through one extraordinary performance, through ordinary moments approached with extraordinary care. You do not suddenly become trustworthy. You become trustworthy one promise at a time. You do not suddenly become wise. You become wise one lesson at a time. You do not suddenly become wealthy. You become the kind of person capable of creating and sustaining wealth one decision at a time. There is tremendous freedom in accepting that truth. It means you do not have to transform your entire life today. You only need to make today's next decision wisely. Read one chapter, make one thoughtful investment, learn one useful skill, help one person sincerely, spend 1 hour creating instead of consuming. Those actions seem almost insignificant while you are doing them. Compounding quietly smiles because it knows what they will become. Years from now, someone may ask for your advice. They will hope for one secret, one hidden formula, one shortcut. You may disappoint them with your answer. There was no shortcut. There was only consistency. There was only learning. There was only patience. There was only choosing long-term meaning over short-term comfort again and again until those choices became your identity. The world loves dramatic stories because they are entertaining. Real transformation is usually much quieter. A person decides to stop complaining. A family begins living below their means. An employee spends evenings mastering a skill nobody required them to learn. A business owner chooses honesty over easy profit. A young student reads instead of scrolling. A parent teaches a child that money is earned by creating value, not by chasing appearances. None of those moments trend across the internet, yet history is quietly shaped by them. The future is rarely changed by one spectacular event. It is changed by millions of invisible decisions made with integrity. Remember this whenever you begin feeling behind. You are not racing anyone. You are building someone. That someone will make tomorrow's decisions. That someone will recognize tomorrow's opportunities. That someone will either attract or repel tomorrow's wealth. So treat today's version of yourself with respect. Feed your mind carefully. Protect your attention. Choose your influences wisely. Guard your reputation. Strengthen your discipline. Invest in your relationships. Remain curious. Stay humble enough to keep learning. Stay courageous enough to keep acting. Stay grateful enough to enjoy the journey instead of postponing happiness until some distant milestone. Because there is another paradox hidden inside prosperity. The people who appreciate what they already have are often the very people trusted with even more. Gratitude sharpens perception. Instead of constantly noticing what is missing, you begin noticing resources that were available all along, skills you overlooked, people willing to help, ideas waiting to be explored, doors that were never actually locked. Scarcity narrows vision. Gratitude expands it, and expanded vision sees possibilities invisible to fearful minds. If there is one image I hope remains with you long after these words fade, let it be this. Picture yourself standing beside a river. Most people spend their lives running downstream, trying desperately to grab every floating coin before it disappears around the next bend. They become exhausted, anxious, competitive, always afraid they are too late. Now picture another person. Instead of chasing every coin, they begin walking upstream. They discover where the river begins. They learn how value is created, how trust is earned, how problems are solved, how communities grow, how innovation serves people. Eventually, the current itself begins carrying opportunity toward them, not because life became easier, because they finally understood where wealth is born. It is born wherever human lives become better because of what you consistently contribute. That contribution may be knowledge, leadership, craftsmanship, compassion, innovation, reliability, encouragement, wisdom. Every lasting fortune is simply value recognized by enough people over enough time. So stop measuring your days only by what you earned. Measure them by what you improved. Whom did you help think more clearly? What problem did you solve? What promise did you keep? What skill did you strengthen? What fear did you overcome? What habit did you reinforce? Those are the questions that quietly build extraordinary futures. One day, perhaps many years from now, you will look back at the person you are today. You will remember the doubts, the uncertainty, the questions about whether your efforts were enough. You may even smile, because you will realize that the greatest transformation was never in your finances. It was in your character. Money simply followed. The account grew because the person managing it grew. The opportunities expanded because your capacity expanded. The relationships deepened because your integrity deepened. The business flourished because your service improved. The life became richer because you first became richer within. That is the meaning behind the title of this journey. Stop chasing money. Make wealth chase you instead. Not through tricks, not through empty motivation, not through wishful thinking, through becoming so valuable, so dependable, so disciplined, so thoughtful, and so deeply committed to serving others that opportunity begins looking for you before you ever begin looking for it. Walk forward with patience. Build with intention. Learn without pride. Serve without keeping score. Lead without arrogance. Give without fear. Grow without comparison. And remember this whenever the world tries to convince you that success is only about what can be counted. The greatest wealth will never fit inside a bank account. It lives inside the person you choose to become. When that person grows stronger every single day, money is no longer something you spend your life chasing. It becomes one more reflection of a life already rich in wisdom, purpose, courage, contribution, and lasting value. Every generation inherits a story about money. Some inherit the belief that wealth belongs only to the lucky. Some inherit the belief that only endless sacrifice creates success. Others grow up believing that if they simply work harder than everyone else, prosperity will eventually appear. There is truth hidden inside every one of those ideas, but none of them tells the whole story. The complete story begins with value. It continues with discipline. It matures through patience, and it flourishes because of service. Money is never the starting point. It is the echo. If you shout into a canyon, the echo does not appear first. The voice comes first. Your choices are the voice. Your habits are the voice. Your character is the voice. Money simply echoes what has already been built inside you. That understanding removes something incredibly heavy from your shoulders. It removes desperation. Desperation causes people to force relationships that should never exist. It causes businesses to chase every customer instead of serving the right ones exceptionally well. It causes investors to follow excitement instead of evidence. It causes talented people to accept lives far smaller than the ones they were capable of creating because fear convinces them that security is more important than purpose. Yet purpose has a quiet strength that security alone can never provide. Purpose gives difficult days meaning. Purpose keeps you learning when results arrive slowly. Purpose reminds you that your work matters because it improves another human life. When purpose leads, profit often follows. When profit leads without purpose, satisfaction rarely arrives. Look closely at the people whose work has endured for decades. Authors whose books continue changing lives long after they were written. Inventors whose ideas still improve everyday living. Entrepreneurs whose companies continue serving millions. Teachers whose students become leaders. Their greatest achievement was never making money. Their greatest achievement was creating lasting value. Money became one expression of that value, not the definition of it. There will be seasons in your own life when progress feels invisible. Respect those seasons. Seeds never panic because they cannot yet see the tree. They continue growing beneath the surface, roots first, branches later. Many people abandon dreams because they judge roots by the standards of branches. They forget that invisible growth is still growth. Every skill you practice, every book you finish, every difficult conversation you choose to have, every promise you honor, every hour invested in becoming wiser, those are roots. And healthy roots eventually produce visible fruit. There may also be seasons when life humbles you. Perhaps an investment fails, a business struggles, a career changes unexpectedly. Someone you trusted disappoints you. Those moments do not erase your progress. They reveal your foundation. Storms do not create weak foundations. They reveal them. If your identity depends entirely upon external success, every setback feels like personal destruction. If your identity rests upon character, every setback becomes instruction. Instruction can be expensive, but it is rarely wasted when accepted with humility. Remember that the strongest bridges are tested before people trust them. Your life is no different. One day, someone will trust your leadership because of the challenges you survived with integrity. Someone will trust your financial wisdom because you learned difficult lessons responsibly. Someone will trust your encouragement because they know you have walked through uncertainty yourself. Pain transformed into wisdom becomes service. Service transformed into consistency becomes value. Value sustained over time becomes wealth. The pattern remains beautifully simple. There is another gift that prosperity quietly offers when understood correctly. Choice. The ability to choose work that aligns with your values. The ability to help family without constant fear. The ability to support meaningful causes. The ability to invest in ideas that improve the future. Choice is one of the highest expressions of financial freedom, not endless luxury. Meaningful choice. And meaningful choice requires meaningful preparation. Preparation rarely feels glamorous. It happens in ordinary mornings, ordinary afternoons, ordinary evenings, long before extraordinary opportunities appear. If you ever begin doubting whether small improvements matter, remember this. A plane leaving one city changes its direction by only a few degrees. At first, the difference is impossible to notice. Hours later, it arrives on an entirely different continent. Your habits work exactly the same way. One better decision today, another tomorrow, another next week. Months pass, years pass. The destination becomes almost unrecognizable from the path you once followed. Never underestimate the power of tiny corrections made consistently. Life compounds everything. Discipline compounds. Kindness compounds. Knowledge compounds. Trust compounds. So do excuses. So does procrastination. So does neglect. Every day is quietly adding interest to something. Choose carefully what account you are funding. And if one day you find yourself surrounded by success, remember where it came from. Remember the nights when nobody noticed your effort. Remember the people who believed in you before results appeared. Remember the teachers whose wisdom shortened your journey. Remember the mistakes that made you humbler instead of bitter. Gratitude protects prosperity from becoming arrogance. Arrogance often destroys what gratitude would have preserved. Remain teachable. Remain generous. Remain grounded. The higher you climb, the more valuable those qualities become. Because true wealth is not measured by how much life gives you. It is measured by how much value continues flowing through you into the lives of others. That is a legacy no market can reduce. No inflation can diminish. No recession can erase. And perhaps that is the greatest realization of all. The goal was never simply to become rich. The goal was to become the kind of person whose presence leaves the world more hopeful, more capable, and more prosperous than it was before. When you become that person, money stops being something you chase. Opportunity begins recognizing your name. Trust begins opening doors before you knock. Relationships deepen because people know your character is stronger than your ambition. And wealth, in its truest sense, becomes more than numbers. It becomes the natural reflection of a life lived with wisdom, courage, discipline, service, and unwavering integrity. Carry that truth with you. Return to it whenever the world tempts you with shortcuts. Return to it whenever fear whispers that you are falling behind. Return to it whenever success threatens to make you forget what truly matters. Because the greatest investment you will ever make is still the one looking back at you in the mirror. Strengthen that investment every day. Everything else will follow. And when someone eventually asks how you built a life of lasting prosperity, you will not need a complicated answer. You became more valuable than your fears, more disciplined than your excuses, more patient than your doubts, more committed to serving than to impressing. From that moment forward, you were no longer chasing wealth. Wealth simply found it impossible to ignore the person you had become. One final image deserves to stay with you long after this audiobook comes to an end. Imagine standing in a quiet valley before sunrise. The air is still. The ground is covered with dew. Nothing appears to be happening. No applause, no celebration, no visible success. Then, almost without warning, the first light reaches the tops of the mountains. Within minutes, the entire landscape changes. The valley did not transform in that instant. The earth had been preparing for sunrise all night. Your life follows the same rhythm. People often notice the sunrise. They rarely appreciate the night that made it possible. Never become discouraged because your preparation is invisible. Invisible preparation has always preceded visible success. The strongest buildings spend months below ground before anyone admires their height. The deepest relationships spend years earning trust before they become unbreakable. The most respected leaders spend decades developing judgment before anyone calls them wise. The greatest fortunes are no different. If your attention remains fixed only on visible rewards, you may abandon the very work creating your future. Instead, learn to love the process that no one applauds. Love becoming a better listener. Love becoming more disciplined. Love becoming calmer under pressure. Love becoming the person who keeps learning after everyone else believes they already know enough. Because those qualities continue paying dividends long after trends disappear. There is something fascinating about people who possess genuine inner confidence. They do not rush to prove themselves. They do not interrupt constantly. They do not measure every conversation by what they can gain. They carry quiet certainty. That certainty comes from evidence, not external evidence, internal evidence. Evidence collected through thousands of promises kept, thousands of moments where they chose responsibility over excuses, thousands of decisions that aligned with their values even when nobody else was watching. Confidence built upon character cannot be purchased. It must be earned. And once earned, it becomes one of the most attractive qualities in every area of life. Business, friendship, leadership, family. People naturally trust those who trust themselves for the right reasons. There is another lesson that deserves your attention. Never confuse speed with direction. A person running toward the wrong destination only arrives there sooner. The modern world celebrates acceleration, faster communication, faster transportation, faster technology, faster results. Yet wisdom continues asking the same timeless question. Are you moving toward the life you actually want? Pause often enough to answer honestly. Success without alignment eventually becomes exhaustion. Alignment with steady effort becomes fulfillment. One creates constant tension. The other creates quiet momentum. Momentum is one of the most misunderstood forces in life. People believe momentum appears after extraordinary victories. Usually, it begins after ordinary consistency. The first workout leads to another. The first investment leads to another. The first courageous conversation makes the second less frightening. The first disciplined month becomes the first disciplined year. Eventually, your habits begin carrying you forward even on days when motivation disappears. That is true freedom. Freedom is not the absence of effort. Freedom is living in harmony with habits that naturally move you toward the future you have chosen. Imagine trying to push a massive stone uphill. The beginning feels impossible. Every step demands energy. Eventually, the stone reaches the top. Now gravity begins helping instead of resisting. Positive habits eventually create their own momentum. Negative habits do exactly the same. Choose carefully which direction your gravity is pulling. There will always be people promising effortless wealth, instant success, guaranteed prosperity. Life continues whispering a quieter truth. Anything worth keeping is worth becoming capable of carrying. If wealth arrives before wisdom, it often disappears. If wisdom arrives before wealth, wealth usually finds a way to remain. That is why personal growth is never separate from financial growth. They are different branches growing from the same root. Strengthen the root. The branches will take care of themselves. Another thought may serve you well. Never allow success to reduce your kindness. Power reveals character. Money reveals priorities. Influence reveals intention. The world does not simply need more wealthy people. It needs more wise, wealthy people, more generous, wealthy people, more ethical, wealthy people, more people who understand that prosperity reaches its highest purpose when it creates opportunity for others. Imagine the difference one financially healthy family can make across generations. Children raised without constant fear, education made possible, businesses created, communities strengthened, acts of generosity multiplied. Your commitment to becoming financially wise extends far beyond your own lifetime. Every responsible decision echoes into futures you may never personally witness. That thought alone gives ordinary discipline extraordinary meaning. Perhaps someone listening today feels discouraged. Perhaps they believe they started too late. Perhaps they have made painful mistakes. Perhaps debt feels overwhelming. Perhaps opportunities seem scarce. If that is you, remember this. Your past explains you. It does not imprison you. Every master was once a beginner. Every expert once felt uncertain. Every prosperous person has chapters they rarely speak about. Moments of doubt, moments of failure, moments when quitting looked perfectly reasonable. What separated them was not perfection. It was persistence guided by learning. Do not demand perfection from yourself. Demand honesty. Demand consistency. Demand growth. Growth compounds more reliably than perfection ever could. When you fall, study the lesson. When you succeed, study the process. In both cases, remain a student. Students continue growing. Those who believe they have nothing left to learn quietly begin falling behind. Keep your curiosity alive. It is one of the few investments whose returns never truly stop. As this journey comes to its natural close, remember that wealth is not attracted by desperation. It is attracted by usefulness, by trust, by discipline, by patience, by courage, by the quiet confidence of someone who no longer asks, "How can I get more?" Instead, they ask, "How can I become more?" Become more thoughtful, become more capable, become more generous, become more resilient, become more valuable. The remarkable truth is that once becoming replaces chasing, life begins responding differently. People notice your reliability. Opportunities notice your preparation. Success notices your consistency. And wealth, almost as if it has been waiting for this moment all along, begins following the trail of value you leave behind. So leave every room wiser than you entered it. Leave every promise stronger than when you made it. Leave every challenge more prepared than when you found it. Leave every person feeling seen, respected, and encouraged. Leave every year better than the last, because that is how extraordinary lives are built. Not in one dramatic leap, but through thousands of quiet decisions made with intention. And one day, without needing to announce it, without needing to convince anyone, without needing to chase anything at all, you will realize something beautiful. The person who once spent every day searching for wealth has disappeared. In their place stands someone whose character creates it, whose wisdom protects it, whose generosity gives it purpose, and whose life proves a timeless truth. When you stop chasing money and dedicate yourself to becoming invaluable, wealth no longer has to be pursued. It begins pursuing you. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: wealth is not a finish line. It is a responsibility. For years, you may believe that if you could only reach a certain number, everything would finally become easy. Then one day, you arrive there. Life does not suddenly become perfect. It simply asks a different question. What will you do with everything you have been trusted to build? That question separates accumulation from legacy. Accumulation asks how much you can keep. Legacy asks how much good your life can continue creating long after you are gone. Imagine two people reaching the same level of financial success. The first becomes consumed by protecting every dollar. Every conversation revolves around fear. Every decision revolves around loss. Every relationship becomes a transaction. The second understands that wealth is a resource. They continue investing in people. They continue learning. They continue supporting meaningful ideas. They continue building opportunities for others. Years later, both leave behind money. Only one leaves behind impact. Never forget that difference. Because people rarely remember the size of someone's bank account. They remember how that person made others feel. They remember the doors that were opened, the encouragement that arrived at exactly the right moment, the belief that someone had in them before they had it in themselves. Sometimes the greatest investment you ever make is believing in another human being. History quietly proves this again and again. A teacher changes one student's confidence. That student builds a company employing thousands. A parent teaches discipline to one child. That child grows into a leader who transforms an entire community. A mentor spends one afternoon sharing wisdom. The listener avoids mistakes that would have cost decades. Value has a remarkable way of multiplying after it leaves your hands. Money behaves similarly when guided by wisdom. That is why generosity is not merely an act of kindness. It is a declaration of abundance. Scarcity clutches. Abundance contributes. Scarcity fears there will never be enough. Abundance understands that value can always be created again. This mindset changes everything. You stop seeing other successful people as competitors. You begin seeing them as evidence. Evidence that meaningful lives can still be built. Evidence that integrity still matters. Evidence that patience still works. Evidence that discipline still produces extraordinary results. Envy asks why them. Wisdom asks, what can I learn? Choose wisdom every time. There will always be moments when life feels unfair. Someone less prepared may receive an opportunity before you. Someone louder may receive attention you believe belongs elsewhere. Someone may inherit advantages you never had. Accept reality without surrendering your purpose. Comparison steals energy that could have been invested in growth. The world has never promised equal beginnings. It still rewards remarkable contribution. Focus your attention there. Every hour spent improving yourself increases the value of every future hour. That is one of the highest returns available in life. Knowledge compounds. Skill compounds. Reputation compounds. Character compounds. And perhaps most importantly, self-respect compounds. Because every day you honor your values, you quietly become someone you admire. That may be the greatest form of wealth. To look in the mirror without pretending. To know your success was earned honestly. To know your promises were kept. To know your family trusts your word. To know your friends seek your advice because your life reflects your principles. No luxury can replace that feeling. No possession can imitate it. It must be lived. There is a beautiful simplicity hidden beneath every principle we have explored together. Wake up with purpose. Learn continuously. Create more value than you consume. Protect your integrity. Spend thoughtfully. Invest patiently. Serve generously. Stay humble. Remain curious. Keep your promises. Repeat day after day, year after year, decade after decade. Eventually, Those simple actions create a life that appears extraordinary to people who only notice outcomes. They never saw the repetition. They never saw the quiet evenings. They never saw the discipline when no one was watching. But you will know, and that knowledge will give you a confidence that applause never could. As you leave this audiobook behind and return to your own life, resist the temptation to change everything overnight. Choose one habit. Strengthen it. Choose one skill. Master it. Choose one relationship. Invest in it. Choose one fear. Face it. Small victories become powerful identities. Powerful identities create extraordinary futures. One final thought. If life were generous enough to let you meet your future self 20 years from now, what do you think that wiser version of you would say? Perhaps they would not speak about markets. Perhaps they would not mention promotions or possessions. Perhaps they would simply smile and say something like this: "Thank you for not quitting when progress was invisible. Thank you for choosing integrity when shortcuts looked easier. Thank you for believing that becoming mattered more than appearing. Thank you for understanding that wealth was never something to chase. It was always something to prepare yourself to receive." Let that imagined conversation guide your next decision, not your next decade, your next decision. Because your future is not created all at once. It is created one choice at a time, one habit at a time, one act of courage at a time, one promise kept at a time, one lesson learned at a time. Walk forward with quiet confidence, not because the road will always be easy, but because you now understand something many people spend their entire lives searching for. Money is attracted to value. Value is created by character. Character is shaped by daily choices, and daily choices remain completely within your hands. So build patiently, lead humbly, serve generously, learn relentlessly, live intentionally, and never forget the timeless truth that brought us together. Stop chasing money. Become the kind of person whose wisdom, discipline, courage, and contribution make wealth feel completely at home. When you do, success is no longer something you desperately pursue. It becomes the natural consequence of the person you choose to become every single day. And after everything we have explored together, there is one truth that deserves to become more than an idea. It deserves to become your standard. From this day forward, stop asking whether something will make you money. First ask whether it will make you more capable. Capability creates money. Money does not automatically create capability. A person who knows how to solve meaningful problems can lose everything and begin again. A person who only knows how to spend what they have earned may gain everything and still lose it. That is why your greatest investment will always be yourself. Not because it sounds inspiring, because it is practical. Every book you study changes the quality of your decisions. Every difficult conversation handled with wisdom strengthens your leadership. Every skill you master increases the number of ways you can create value. Every healthy habit expands your ability to remain focused when others become distracted. Those returns never stop paying. The remarkable thing about becoming valuable is that the world rarely notices while it is happening. People notice the promotion. They do not notice the years of preparation. They notice the successful business. They do not notice the thousands of problems quietly solved before anyone paid attention. They notice financial freedom. They do not notice the evening spent saying no to unnecessary spending. They notice confidence. They do not notice the years spent keeping promises to yourself. Never confuse invisible progress with lack of progress. The roots of every meaningful life grow in silence. One day, the results become impossible to hide. Until then, continue growing. Continue learning when nobody asks you to. Continue improving when nobody rewards you yet. Continue showing integrity when shortcuts appear profitable. Continue treating people with respect when they cannot offer you anything in return. Character developed in private eventually becomes reputation in public. And reputation is one of the few assets that opens doors money alone never can. There will come a time when someone offers you an opportunity not because of your resume, not because of your social status, not because of your possessions, but because your name has become associated with trust. Protect that privilege with everything you have. A trustworthy name is worth more than a temporary fortune. Remember that every financial decision is also a character decision. Every purchase says something about your priorities. Every investment says something about your vision. Every day, ask yourself one simple question. How can I become so valuable that the future I dream about naturally begins moving toward me? Then spend that day answering the question with your actions. Again, tomorrow, and the day after that. Because the future is not built in giant leaps. It is built in faithful steps, one after another. Until one day you realize that what once felt impossible has become your reality. Not because money changed your life first, because you changed first. And once you changed, everything else slowly began to follow. Remember this whenever the world tells you to chase money. Become so valuable, so disciplined, and so deeply committed to creating value that wealth has no choice but to follow the person you have become.